what do y'all grow on the 125 acres? Or how much of it is actually being grown? I mean, I know you have the buildings and stuff.
There is some row crop or some production farmland on the 125 acres. There's a lot of other stuff on the 125 acres, such as timber, the venue, parking lots, different things. But we also lease some farms in the community. Everything we tend's within 1.5 miles of our location, and basically anything that we tend that's not there on the farms right out the back gate or so. But we tend about 120 acres, and we grow corn, we grow rye, barley, and rotate out with soybeans. Everything that we use at the distillery, except for the soybeans, are for rotation. We sell those on the grain market, and sometimes we sell excess grain if we have a really good year, but most of it we use there for the distillery, the corn, rye, and barley.
Welcome to another episode of Best of Johnston County, brought to you by Breeden Law Office. Our host, Jonathan Breeden, an experienced family lawyer with a deep connection to the community, is ready to take you on a journey through the area that he has called home for over 20 years. Whether it's a deep dive into the love locals have for the county or unraveling the complexities of family law, Best of Johnston County presents an authentic slice of this unique community.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Johnston County Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden, and today we have a special guest with us, Jeremy Norris, owner of Broadslab Distillery between Benson and Meadow in Johnston County. And if you've not been there, it is a fascinating place. It's a beautiful venue. We're going to talk a little bit about how he got into the distillery business, the different types of bourbons and stuff that he creates, his events. He's got the agritourism thing where he does weddings and stuff like that. And of course, why he loves Johnston County. But before we get into this, I want to invite everybody that if this is your first time listening or following or watching the Best of Johnston County Podcast, that you will like, subscribe, or follow this podcast wherever you're seeing it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, or any of the other social media channels of the Best of Johnston County Podcast, so that you'll be aware of future episodes of the Best of Johnston County Podcast. The Best of Johnston County Podcast comes out every Monday, so be checking back every Monday for new and exciting guests, and go back and listen to some of our previous guests. I think you will find it very entertaining and educational. I know I've learned a ton in the time we've been doing this. So welcome, Jeremy. So anyway, let's start with, tell me your name and what you do.
Well, my name's Jeremy Norris. I own Broadslab Distillery. It's just a family farm about 4 miles out of Benson towards Meadow. And I was raised there, grew up there. Actually, it was my granddad's farm. And he used to have a produce farm and grew produce there beside the road. And there's a big oak tree out in front. You've probably seen it before out there at the main building at the highway. Well, that's where I grew up, under that tree beside the road, and we sold roadside produce. This was before Interstate 40 was built. Johnston County's changed a lot in my lifetime. Back then, before Interstate 40, 50 was the route to the beach, and you had all your beach traffic going to the beach. And actually, that's what made our business viable, is the tourist traffic coming through. And we sold them watermelons, cantaloupes, corn, tomatoes, okra, cucumber, everything you can think of in the produce lineup. And so that's how I'm growing and raising produce and selling produce there beside the road. And I think they opened Interstate 40 in about 1989, something like that.
I think it was around 92.
Was it 92?
I think it was around 92.
Yeah. I knew it was in the late 80s or early 90s.
Yeah, I think it was. They finally finished it. It was around 1992. And this was the last section of 40 between California and Wilmington.
That's right. That changed everything for us when it opened. It dried up that traffic on 50. Everything went to 40, and we still had some dedicated customers that would, veer off. But so it changed the whole scene of things. And so as I got older, I started looking into what can we do with this farm to stay engaged in agriculture on a small scale and make it viable again. And so that's how we founded and started the distillery.
So how big a farm is it?
Right now, our farm's about 125 acres.
Okay.
It was not that big to start with. The farm at the front is what you call a century farm. It's been in the family since the 1840s.
Oh, my goodness.
That farm used to be 400 and some few odd acres. And through the generations, it got cut up and dwindled down. I've actually bought some of it back over the years. So we're up to 125 acres there on that piece of land.
Okay. And so what do y'all grow on the 125 acres? Or how much of it is actually being grown? I mean, I know you have the buildings and stuff.
There is some row crop or some production farmland on the 125 acres, but there's a lot of other stuff on the 125 acres, such as timber, the venue, parking lots, different things. But we also lease some farms in the community. Everything we tend is within a mile and a half of our location.
Okay.
And basically anything that we tend that's not there on the farms right out the back gate or so. But we tend about 120 acres, and we grow corn, we grow rye, barley, and rotate out with soybeans. Everything that we use at the distillery, except for the soybeans, are for rotation. We sell those on the grain market. And sometimes we sell excess grain if we have a really good year, but most of it we use there for the distillery, the corn, rye, and barley.
So have you always done corn, rye, and barley, or was that a new thing when you decided to get into distillery business?
Yeah, so that was something new. The only thing we had ever done was my granddaddy, he used to grow grain and sweet potatoes in the back in the years past before my time. But during my lifetime, he was primarily a produce farmer, and we were set up for produce on a small scale. The row crop thing is a whole lot different.
Right.
We've got different equipment, a little bigger equipment. We started on it probably about 14, 15 years ago, and we've acquired our own combine, and we keep upgrading and trying to stay up on the ag side of things too, along with the distillery. So it's been kind of like a double whammy, trying to keep the distillery and the farm both growing and innovating at the same time.
Right. Well, and with the economies of scale now, it seems like the family farm at 40 to 100 acres is going away because the cost is involved and the machinery and all of that. It seems like most people that are trying to make a living farming are trying to farm 300, 400, 500, 1,000 acres, whether it be through sharecropping or buying up the land or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't see anybody making a living on the farm. Most of them now, like I said, are a couple thousand acres or more, unless they've got some type of value added product or commodity that they're producing and adding value. There's a lot of neat stuff going on. So it is possible, but it's not possible. You couldn't do 100 acres of row crop and make a living.
No.
So that's how we knew that. So that's what we kind of got involved in. So if we take our grain and turn it into whiskey, then that might be sustainable.
Well, I mean, that's value added, right? My father-in-law is a farmer and was a farmer, but now he's largely retired, and he has one of his friends farming his land. He owns 2 farms, and I think that farmer is doing over 1,000 acres. If you put all the farms he's now sharecropping with or leasing out or whatever, including my father-in-law's 2 farms up in Maryland. And, you just talk about when you get to that scale and you got all this, mainly soybeans and corn, and you've got it sitting in a silo, and the price of these commodities go up a few cents, and the amount this guy has, 3 or 4 cents is a lot of $1,000.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. As he's watching it, and I find the whole thing fascinating.
It's a penny business. Yeah, it's a penny business.
Yeah, they primarily just rotate corn and soybeans up there in northern Maryland, right on the Pennsylvania line. And anyway, my father-in-law, he's retired now, but I say he's happy to still have the crops there. The crops still create income. You know what I mean? The land's in use, and that's all important. And of course, in Maryland, and I guess they have this in North Carolina, they have this ag preservation thing as well, where the government will pay you not to develop your land and keep it as agriculture. And I know North Carolina has that. My grandfather was in that program 30 years ago before he passed away. And I don't know how big a program it is now, but I know it's a thing. And
it's a program they're trying to grow, and I think they're having some success. There's far more land getting developed more than they're getting preserved by far. So,
right.
I mean, it is a dwindling, resource.
Right,
yeah,
right.
That's the word for it. It's kind of a dwindling resource.
Right. So when did you start the distillery?
We actually started the thought process and started planning and putting together about 2008, and we actually built our first distillery, the initial building, about 2010. We got licensed in 2011, and we hit the marketplace in 2012.
Okay, so 4 years from...
It took about 4 years to put it all together.
Okay, I got you. And so how did you learn to make distilled spirits?
I grew up on the farm with my granddaddy and his older brother, helped us a lot in the field. And both of them were ex-bootleggers, back in the 40s.
Bootleggers in Johnston County?
Yeah,
I would have never heard of such.
So, if people are not from this area, I've been here my whole life. Pretty much, even in my lifetime when I was younger, the older folks, a lot of them are died out and gone now, but it was pretty common. About everybody had a garden and a hog in the pen, and a lot of them had a liquor still too. So
right.
they were pretty self-sufficient folks, and it was really a common thing. Like I ain't gonna say all the neighbors, but a lot of our neighbors and a lot of the acquaintances in the community, a liquor still was not a very uncommon thing, even in my lifetime.
I understand
and
that.
It was more common back in his heyday. But I just was with them, and I heard them talk about the stories, and they weren't really telling me. It was just stuff I was overhearing, and I got intrigued and interested in it, and I actually started making wine and stuff when I was 12, 13 years old, and I caught the bug because you can mess it up, you can make it good. I mean, it's a natural occurrence, but it's a challenge. So when you learn how to do it, it never gets old to me. That's how it started.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure there's still people out there bootlegging, and the whole point of it, I guess, it starts back with Prohibition back in like the 30s or whatever. But the more modern bootleggers are just trying to not pay the taxes. The taxes to the government. We had Chad Stewart, the head of the Johnston County Alcohol Beverage Control Board Committee. He's their executive director. He was on this podcast a few weeks ago. If you want to know how liquor is regulated in North Carolina, go back and listen to that podcast. And so part of that is these people are trying to avoid these taxes. They're trying to avoid the regulation. They want to be able to sell it to whoever they want to sell it to without having to go through the state. And it is one of the consequences of a controlled beverage system. I personally think that we should have the controlled beverage system we have, but I understand that's why it exists. Everybody's like, we don't have prohibition anymore. Why do we need the bootleggers? They're trying to get around the taxes and being able to sell it to whoever they want to sell it to.
Well, and then you got a public safety aspect of it.
Correct.
You got a lot of stuff. There's nobody looking and no regulations. You got some public safety concerns, but looking back in history, I think the whiskey it was not taxed at one time. I think, didn't the tax get enacted to pay for the Revolutionary War? I think it got enacted. They needed funds, they needed money, so they enacted the tax on the whiskey, and it took off from there. And it's been a good money maker for the local and federal government for many, many years. And I think it's a good thing, positive thing, because that's just a money generator.
Right. And what Chad Stewart told us was that the taxes on the liquor is $700 million to the general fund of the state every year. And you're talking about a budget this year at about $30 billion. $700 million, a lot of money. So it's a money thing, right? And so that's kind of what it is. So how does it work? What's the process? How long does it take? I don't know anything about it.
It's all a natural process. Basically, we like I said, we grow our grain. So every kernel of grain that we use, we grow it, produce it there on the farm. But it's all about starch content. And so a grain stores starch, and basically what it's for is when you plant that seed, that starch is energy for that seed to germinate and come through the soil. So that starch is built up in there. So our job is we mill the grain, we bust it up into a kind of a fine, almost a powder, but not quite, kind of like a cornmeal consistency. And then we cook it like cooking a big pot of grits, and we cook the starch out. And then once we get the starch cooked out of the grain, we'll add enzymes, and we convert those starches into fermentable sugars. We do 1,000-gallon batches, and it takes about 2,500 pounds of grain to get enough starch to turn into enough sugar to actually ferment 1,000 gallons of mash. And then once we've done that starch sugar conversion, it's an all-day process, cooking and cooling. We'll put it in a fermenter and let it ferment for about a week. We add yeast to it, and the yeast consume those sugars that you've exposed and created, and they turn them to byproduct as alcohol. You make it basically a beer, and then we put it in the still and we distill it, and that just purifies everything and concentrates the alcohol. But in a nutshell, that's pretty much the process. And then we do different things with it. Mainly now we're barreling a lot of our whiskey, so we'll put it in a barrel and throw it in the rick house, and it'll stay in there for several years before it ever sees, a bottle or glass.
Okay. And I know people talk about that. So what is it doing in those years as it sits in the barrel? I mean, what is it?
So, the main product of that, what we produce is ethanol. And in that ethanol, there's a lot of other compounds. You got fatty acids, you got all kinds of things. And you got different alcohols, some that have lower boiling points. But when you put it in that barrel, it gives it a time to mellow and mature, and some of the volatiles will actually get a chance to evaporate out over the years. You usually lose, as a general rule of thumb, about 3% a year you're going to lose in that barrel, just to what they call angel share, the evaporation. And also you're going to pick up some sugars and some things out of the wood. And that's what contributes to, you hear people say, well, it's got a vanilla note or a tobacco finish, or, I taste raspberries. That actually comes from the woods, the sugars in the wood, and that wood's been toasted and charred. So evaporation, the contact it comes in with the wood, that's what makes the complexity of the whiskey.
That's interesting. And so y'all make at least 4 different types.
Yeah, we make quite a few different things. In the bourbon and rye lineup, what we're barrel aging, it's just a bourbon and a rye. We bottle 4 different bottles. We got 2 different versions of each. We've got a single barrel cask strength, which means we go out to the rick house. It doesn't get proofed. It doesn't get blended with another barrel. It's worthy of being bottled just like it is. We'll just pull it out of there and dump it and bottle it up, whatever proof. And they're pretty high proof. They're around 115 proof. And then we do another one that we blend them together, and we can create different profiles, and we'll proof it down to, the bourbon's 93 and the rye's about a 96. And it's just a little lower proof. So it's
okay, I got
strong.
you.
Have family law questions? Need guidance to navigate legal challenges? The compassionate team at Breeden Law Office is here to help. Visit us at www.breedenfirm.com for practical advice, resources, or to book a consultation. Remember, when life gets messy, you don't have to face it alone.
And then back to the beverage control. How do you sell it? Where do you sell it?
So we're able now, when we started distillery, we were not, and the state has actually, the legislatures have updated the laws and made it more friendly for distilleries over the years. But we sell it at our storefront to our visitors and tourists that come through. But the main outlet is the North Carolina ABC Commission. It goes to a warehouse in Raleigh, and say, for example, Johnston County, if they order it, then it comes out of Raleigh. So it goes from Johnston County to Raleigh, and then from Raleigh back into Johnston County, and they'll house it and put it on their shelf and sell it.
I got you. Do you get to set the price?
I do. Now, there's a huge markup in spirits with the federal excise tax, the state excise tax, bailment fees. There's just all kinds of things built into it. So we have a formula that we go, when we know what we need, our margin needs to be, we add all that stuff up together. We set the price for it, and the state pretty much takes their cut from there.
Okay.
And the federal. I mean, there's a lot of cuts that come out of that.
I got you. So how much are you selling?
So they've got a pretty nifty system. You can go on there and look at the warehouse stocks, and
cool.
You can tell how much inventory is in the warehouse. You can backdate it and see how much was in there 10 days prior, and you can track and monitor what you're doing.
Okay.
And there's reports that come out that they'll tell you, you can see what you're doing. We are currently trying to pick up our game at the present moment. And for the past 10 years, 12 years actually now, I have primarily run that distillery right by myself, as far as production, everything. And we've been a word of a mouth, grassroots company. But just in the past year or so, both of my sons have come into the business. So now we have gotten a lot more help. I can delegate, and we're really trying to pick up our whole game as far as marketing, distribution, sales, tourism. So we're kind of right in the middle of all that right now.
Right. So are you doing this process every week? You doing it once a month?
We slow down in the summertime, but sometimes because of the farming and ground maintenance and catching up on some things. But we try to stay pretty much year round. We'll take off during harvest time a little bit, maybe a week or two. But we try to keep it rolling, because you can't sell it if you ain't got it. And with what we're doing now with these bourbons and rye whiskeys, is we're trying to, 5 years from now, we're going to have 7-year-old whiskey. So we don't know how much we're going to need. So we're going to put back all we can and just keep an inventory and keep filling the rick house. We got a rick house that'll hold 1,008 barrels in the racks.
Oh man!
But we can actually put more on pallets in there. We could probably put 2,000 or 3,000 barrels in there pretty easy for
Oh,
the palate
geez.
and everything.
Okay. Man, that's fascinating right here in Johnston County. Let's talk about your tourism thing. I've been to your facility. I've been to an event there. It's a beautiful barn with a beautiful bar and fireplace. I mean, it is beautiful of any type venue like that I've probably ever been to. How do you do weddings? Talk a little bit about that.
We do all kind. The main thing, we do a lot more weddings than anything else, but we do high school proms, 8th grade dances. We do some political events, fundraisers, banquets, even maybe some corporate team building events, all kinds of things. We've got sound, projection, screens, all this stuff. So kind of set up where we can accommodate pretty much anything you would need to do that, you need 300 space for 300 people or less.
Right. Okay, cool. And I mean, how many weddings y'all do every year? Do you know?
My wife runs that, and I want to say total events, I think she does somewhere 80 some events a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's more than one a week.
Oh yeah, it's
I mean, that's a lot, especially when you're still running a farm and you're distilling and everything else.
Now she does that. She only calls me when something breaks. So she's responsible for all that. She's done a really good job with it.
But y'all also have like Airbnb, or like you could spend the night there. Like you've got a couple of different houses. Talk about that.
So there was a tobacco barn, a stick tobacco barn that my great grandfather built, and it was in bad shape. The roof was tore off, and I went out there and I contemplated tearing it down, and I didn't. I got a tinkering on it, and we decided to fix it up, and we've made an apartment out of it. And it's actually a queen suite. It's 2 floors. It's got a king bed upstairs, little kitchenette downstairs, bathroom. It is really cool. And it stays really busy as far as being booked out. And we've got a little small venue down there for little small events, 50 people and under. And then we've got a home that sleeps about 12 or 14 people. But yeah, so we're in the Airbnb. And then we just have recently added a thing called Harvest Host, where RVs and motorhomes come in and they stay overnight, and they visit. And basically it's a place for them just to park and hang out overnight.
Oh, okay. Cool. And y'all do tours of the distillery. When are the tours?
We do tours on Fridays and Saturdays. We're open way more. We're open right now. We're open Wednesday through Sunday. We're looking eventually we want to go 7 days a week. But I only do tours on Fridays and Saturdays because most of the time, or all of the time, it's either me or my son that does them. So we dedicate our day on Fridays and Saturdays just to doing tours.
And I know the laws changed now. You can sell to the tourists who come and take a tour. So you can sell that directly. But other than that, really, the only other place you can sell is to the state, correct?
Yeah, it's different in different states. We actually have an online distribution out of D.C. I think I'm going to say it's called Big Thirst.
Okay.
And you can go online, and they ship to 35 states. There's 35 states that they can ship into, they cannot ship into. But so North Carolina, the online thing, and then our storefronts, what we're doing right now.
Can you grow enough barley and grain on this 125 acres that you're managing to fill the operation, or you have to buy it from somewhere else?
No, we grow enough, and sometimes, depending on the year, if we have a really productive year, we'll have some left over here or there where we can sell. But currently where we're at, if we do a big upgrade as far as production or something, we may have to look at adding acres. And one of the main things is maybe some more grain storage. But right now we're good.
I got you. But you only want to use what you're growing.
Yeah, that's kind of our thing. Why we started the distillery is so it would give us a way to be able to tend the land and stay engaged in farming and not grow houses.
Right.
So that's the reason why the distillery was started in the first place. And I enjoy the ag side of things.
Right. And you are located between Benson and Meadow on Highway 50, correct?
On Highway 50.
Right. And so if you're headed that way, and before you get to the turn to go to the Meadow Lights, if you're coming out of Benson, would it be the quickest way to get to your place? Would it be to go to Benson and get on 50, or would it be to go to take that Meadow exit and come back up 50 that way?
Depends on where you're coming from.
Okay, if I was coming from anywhere in Johnston County, if I was coming from I-40 east.
Well, so, you can go up 96 that comes right out to 50.
Okay.
The 96 highway, if you're coming off of I-40, you're actually probably better to jump on 95 and then come, because if you go down to Meadow to the 334, you're coming back up.
You're coming back up.
So
okay.
we're 4 miles off of exit 79 off of I-95.
Okay.
And we're 2.5 miles off of exit 334 in Meadow. So it's pretty easy to get to. You can jump off the interstate or catch 96 and come in, or 50 and come in, just depending on where you're located.
Well, now we have Apple Maps and Waze.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real easy to get to. It's not nearly as far as the first time I went. I thought, this is going to take me forever. And it really isn't as far as I thought. I knew I had to go to the other side of Benson and all of that stuff. And I love the Meadow Lights. So I go to the Meadow Lights every year and have for many years. Do you ever go to Meadow Lights?
Oh, yeah. We go through there, and they're really good folks, and they're friends of ours. And honestly, they create a lot of traffic coming by our place and through the crossroads at Meadow. When I say the crossroads at Meadow, I know the restaurant, they just get slammed during that time of year. But it brings a lot of people that wouldn't normally come to the area, actually.
Right. Well, if you've not ever been to the Meadow Lights, is a gigantic outdoor Christmas light display that runs from around Thanksgiving through January 1st. It is in Meadow. The whole thing, when you count the houses and everything, is probably a couple hundred acres. And I don't know how many different big light fixtures there are, but there's a candy store and there's a
train
ride, a merry-go-round, and
pictures with Santa.
Right. They've got everything, and hopefully we'll be able to maybe get somebody from there on to this podcast in the future. But I'm a huge fan of the Meadow Lights. I go every year with my kids. It's not far from your place there on Highway 50 in Broadslab. You're the first guest really we've had that I would consider from Meadow. What else would people find interesting in Meadow? There's the Meadow Grill, which I find is an excellent restaurant and excellent catering.
Yeah, you got a Meadow restaurant, and it's growing. People are figuring out where it's at now. A lot more traffic through that way. But not a lot going on right now. I mean, other than the grill and the Meadow Lights, I don't want to leave anybody out here. Let's see. There's a lot of things that you might see somewhere else that comes from Meadow. A lot of sweet potato growers and a lot of tobacco growers from around there.
But Meadow is part of Johnston County, just as much as 4042, where we're taping this, is, with all of this growth in the Cleveland community and I-40 and tons of houses. Still, as Meadow has often been, mainly small farms and a lot of good people. So we're all in the same county. So when you're thinking that I wish the commissioners would do this or do that or something different, you got to realize it's not all basically the Raleigh suburbs in Johnston County. And they've got to do what's best for the entire county. And some of them have been on this podcast and said that. But it is fascinating that you've got this. There's no bigger difference than Clayton and 4042 and the Cleveland community and Benson and Meadow. There's nothing in common other than we all live in the same county.
You wouldn't think it was the same county.
Right, right.
Difference is night and day between the two ends of the county. And then if you go down towards Bentonville and Devil's Racetrack down there, it's still desolate back there.
No, it is very desolate.
I remember when this community was a lot like Meadow.
Right.
At one time. It's amazing what it's done over the years.
Oh, it's crazy with the growth. So anyway, the next question is, if somebody wanted to get up with you and come visit the distillery or have a wedding, how can they get in contact with y'all?
So we're on Facebook. Our email address is broadslabdistillery@gmail.com. We got broadslabdistillery.com is our website. We're not hard to find if you get out there. And say we're open Wednesday through Sunday, so somebody's always at the storefront and just drop in, come by.
Well, that's cool. Well, the last question we always ask everybody is, you being from Johnston County, grew up here, still live here, raised your family here, what do you love most about Johnston County?
I like the people from Johnston County, and it's, there's a lot of little community pockets throughout the county, and it really is a small knit county when you get, or close knit county,
right.
I guess would be the right word for it. But the sense of community, we still got agriculture. If you need something, you can come out here to 42. But if you want to get back out to the country, in the county, it's still there. It still exists. But that's probably my favorite thing about the county.
I agree 100%. Well, we'd like to thank Jeremy Norris for coming and being on the Best of Johnston County podcast. As we said earlier, feel free to like, subscribe, or follow this podcast wherever you're seeing it today. And come check back. New episodes of the Best of Johnston County podcast, as we said earlier, come out every Monday. Till next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden.
That's the end of today's episode of Best of Johnston County, a show brought to you by the trusted team at Breeden Law Office. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing more interesting facets of this community next week. Every story, every viewpoint adds another thread to the rich tapestry of Johnston County. If the legal aspects highlighted raise some questions, help is just around the corner at www.breedenfirm.com.